Yo, what's going on, guys? This is Kev from 21 Sat Street. Hope you guys are having a good day, a great week, or evening, or afternoon, wherever you guys are watching this. So, this is kind of to go off from my last video that I uploaded, and it got me thinking. And it's something that I've had recent conversations about in the past couple of months. And it's basically this narrative with sovereignty versus uniformity, as I would like to call it. And the reason why I say it is just because of everything that has transpired over the past, 5 months as of this, ever since the year has kicked off with what happened, what we saw with Maduro in Venezuela, what we saw with Iran in the Middle East, and everything else that's just transpiring right now. And it brought me back to a conversation that I had 5 years ago with a friend of mine. And what that conversation was that, and again, just a disclaimer here, I'm not trying to be a geopolitical analyst or subscribe to any, political affiliation or anything. This is just my opinion from the observations that I have made over the past few months and years and so forth. But anyways, I had this conversation with a friend of mine. This was during the 2020 elections and what was going on around that time. And we both were talking about saying, if Trump were to get a second term, which obviously that didn't happen in 2020, but if he were, that he would expose a lot of the old, the flaws and the corruption behind the old system. And now with this new second term, at least from my perspective, we kind of just started seeing that, just not in the way that I expected it. Or I guess anybody else that was expecting. It's like the big unveiling of the curtain, if you ever saw the movie The Wizard of Oz, and you see towards the end where they unveil the great and powerful Oz and all that kind of stuff. Now I'm not, and again, like I said, I'm not saying I have any political affiliations or saying that. This is just an observation, but it's kind of what we're seeing right here, again, with the events that have transpired over the past few months. Which is, and people think this is just, some people think this is just a fight between right versus left, that the US is just going there for resources and all that kind of stuff, and that we're trying to exert our dominance as always. And I'll say this, in hindsight, maybe some of that stuff is true, but really from what I've been seeing is that this is not a fight for just resources or anything like that, but rather it's a fight for control the narrative. Like who is going to, be the most influential in the world. That's why we see that the US wants to have total control and access to the Western Hemisphere. I mean, I'm not sure if you saw what Trump did back in March in Miami, where he invited all those Latin American countries to have the Shields of America. What's going on with with Iran and the allies that the U.S. has, over in the Middle East and that part of the region, that part of the world, with the Strait of Hormuz, from the Panama Canal to Greenland and all that. Now, I know most of the stuff is basically noise, but there is, from what I see, there's a motive behind it. Whether now, what I'm saying from my observation, whether it be short-sighted or whatever you want to call it. Again, it's just my opinion, just my observation. But again, it just kind of goes back to that this is a fight between the old and the new system to come. Now, I'm not saying that Trump is leading the charge and he's going to usher in a brand new system, but rather it's just how everything else around it, everything else that's just encompassing is just unraveling while this is going on because of these series of events that's been going on. And you know, that kind of really opened my eyes. I had this conversation with a friend, like I said, a while back. Well, with another friend, not the friend that I said I mentioned about the 2020 election, but yeah, and I think it just puts things into perspective and all, and because really, and really is because people are hyping up, you know, 2030, Agenda 2030, like we got 4 years, so we got to own our stuff, we got to do this and do that. But like, in my opinion, my humble and unpopular opinion, 2030 has already happened. It has. So really, when they were announcing stuff in Davos, in the economic forum, saying that, you know, you own nothing and be happy, it's already happened. It's been happening from the time that we were born. Now, some people may debate when that really happened. Some say it was, you know, 9/11, 2001. Some say 1971 when we were taking off the gold standard. I would say 1913, just because that was the creation of the Federal Reserve. But who knows? Who knows? And not only that, but like, we live in a subscription-based economy. Like, I remember when it was just, you know, video cassette tapes or DVDs or Blu-ray or 4K, but now everything is just streaming. Same with music. It was just before you had LimeWire, Napster, iTunes, and now with Spotify basically dominating all that. It's like, you know, everything's just subscription based. You got to pay into the subscription, because if you don't pay the subscription, then you can't have access to your movies, to your music, and even with you know, paying for goods and services, products as well. Everything has become subscription based, unfortunately. And eventually, I think we're slowly starting to see that with car purchases as well. Like, I mean, I'll say this. I think I touched about this on my last video as well. Like, at least here in the US, the house that you live in, that you say that you own, sorry to say, but you don't own it. And, you know, whatever backlash that I get from that, I mean, I guess it's just pure observation. You don't need to be a mathematician or an economist to figure this out. But, I mean, when someone is quote unquote buying a home, you're essentially paying out to two landlords. So you're paying the mortgage, which is coming from the bank, which is giving you the financing for that home. And you're also paying the municipality, which you're paying for the property taxes. And here's the thing. Depending what's your term limit with the mortgage company, at least when you pay the mortgage company, you own the building, you own the infrastructure. But you don't own the land that the house is built on. And, you know, if you don't pay your property taxes, guess what? The municipality, the town, or whatever you want to call it, can come and foreclose you or take that home away from you, and you'll see real quick who owns it. And I know there's been talks over in Texas and Florida about getting rid of property taxes, and honestly, if that really comes into fruition, then I say, like, wow, then you actually really do own your home. I think there's like a minority part in the world where you actually own the place where you live in. which includes the land, where there's not a property tax or anything like that. Can't name the countries right off the top of my head, and even if I did, I would have to dig in more deeply because, I could be wrong. Again, I'm just observing. But also the same with your bank account. I mean, whatever money you have in the bank account, it's not really your money, especially if you're putting into one of those accounts. Because I think we all saw what happened with Silicon Valley Bank and all that, and people would say like, oh, but it's FDIC insured and all that, but it's like, yeah, but do you get all the funds back? We'll probably do if it's like under 250K, as they say, but again, I don't know. But anyways, what goes on in those accounts is fractional reserve lending, which is whatever money you have in that account, behind the scenes, they're lending it out to other banks that, for whatever reason they need the money for, or to, I guess, if somebody was making a withdrawal at another bank, they would need to get that and all that. Because try withdrawing all your money out of the bank account in one shoot. I mean, if you do, let me know. I want to know what bank that is. And it just comes back to what I've been talking on this channel is none other than Bitcoin. There's one thing I've learned with Bitcoin is that it's about being your own bank. You controlling the keys and the funds and everything that comes with it. And there's there's some good and bad things, and there's trade-offs just like with anything in life. I mean, and this is what I've been learning since 2017 is ownership, really. And this is, close to true ownership, because it's a bearer asset just like gold and silver. Now you have it until you give it to somebody else, or actually no, I don't want to oversimplify that with Bitcoin. At least Bitcoin in cold storage, you own it, and it's a bearer asset until you either give the wallet or somebody finds your 12 seed phrase and they run off with it. And the same thing with gold and silver as well. Gold and silver is a bit more, I guess you could say, easier, just because it's physical, and if somebody comes into your house, finds it and takes it, then it's theirs. You can't do nothing about it. But there's trade-offs. I mean, people say they want freedom, but like, even with freedom, there's risks as well. And usually that trade-off for freedom is security, where the opposite of freedom is security. And that comes at a cost as well, which is your freedom, which we kind of have seen over the years throughout human history and all that. But yeah, if there's, overall encompassing everything that I tell you, like, Bitcoin, going back to Bitcoin teaches you ownership and it teaches you sovereignty. And I think this is where the world is heading towards. And I think this is what people have been yearning for as well, which is sovereignty. Sovereignty to, to own their money, to own, to own their land, to own the place that they live, sovereignty where they can express, freedom of, speech. I'm not saying that, it's been, again, it has happened over the course of history. We see it in American history and all that. Maybe in world history as well. But the U.S. is a pretty unique one as well. I can only speak as far as for the U.S. So I don't want to make assumptions or anything like that for every other part of the world. But yeah, those are the two things I've learned with Bitcoin over the years, for sure, which is sovereignty and ownership, and just seeing where everything else is heading with the world and all that. Like I said, I could be wrong. It's just my opinion, just my observation. I mean, don't have to agree with me. And if you do, cool. But yeah, that's all for me. Honestly, I wasn't planning to make a video today, but I was so inspired and I wanted to talk about that from last time. I guess, from last time than when I made my last video. But yeah, but more to come, as I said before. But until then, this is Kev from 21 Sat Street. Have a good morning, afternoon, or night, wherever you're watching the video. And yes, until next time, peace.